Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins, for coming this evening, and also all of you that have gave up your evening to come and join us and listen to what Dan has to tell us tonight. And if you'll silence all of your phones so they don't go off. And then if you'll all stand for the flag salute, and then we'll have Pastor Farber come up and we'll have a prayer after the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. God, we sure do love you. We thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. Thank you for the safety that you've given for these who have traveled in already. Lord, I know there are a lot of questions on people's minds tonight, and I pray that you'll give us clarity, give us understanding, help those that are speaking also to have clarity. Bless this food that we are about to receive. Thank you for these who have prepared it. Thank you for these who have provided it for us as well. May everything we do tonight bring honor to your name. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, before we get in line to go and eat, I want to recognize a few people that are here this evening. Senator Clace did not make it. He was supposed to be here tonight. Representative Clark Sanders, Representative Stephen Howe, our local mayor Bill Longbine, and County Commissioner Joe Hay, and City Commissioner Jerry Ivy. And I also would like to introduce Gerald Johnson from Glasgow. He is a candidate that's going to be running in Susan Concannon's position. So I wanted to have you all recognize Gerald. And then we want to thank Harrison Dollar from American for Prosperity for providing our food for this evening. And we will go ahead and start our line with this table, and then from here and go on. And she did tell us that you can go on both sides of the table. So it'll go pretty quick because Speaker Hawkins has to be on the road. He's going to Topeka tonight. You guys can go ahead and continue eating. They tell me I had to have a mic. Before Dan comes up and gets started, I do want to recognize Scott Hill from the Dickinson County representative. Thank you, Scott, for coming. Now, while you guys are still eating, the Granny Brigade has no proceeds, so we don't ever have any money. So when we have to rent a building, we take up a collection for the room rent. So I'm going to have my ladies and gentlemen start at the back and pass a basket down to each table, and if you've got a couple of dollars to put in our basket for room rent, we would appreciate that. Thank you. And I also forgot to mention Dean Mean Productions. He is recording us tonight, and he will have that on YouTube.
YouTube and the Granny Brigade.
YouTube and the Granny Brigade. So we want to thank Dean for doing that for us. He never charges us. He does that for gratitude. Okay, now when you came in and signed in, you were given a card and a pen to write questions on. When Dan is done with his presentation, we will have my ladies and gentlemen come again with the baskets, and you will put your questions that you wrote on the cards in that basket. And then Chad will read the questions to Dan, and then Dan will answer the questions. There will be no questions and no answers from the floor. So we will not accept any questions from the floor. Are you ready, Dan? Thank you.
Okay, since we don't have a podium, I'll lay this stuff out here. Number one, thank you for to the Granny Brigade for inviting me here this evening. It's always a pleasure to go around the state. That's going to echo a little bit, it sounds like. It's truly a pleasure to go around the state and get to speak with folks about issues that are important for the day. But before I start, I do want to introduce one person that hasn't been introduced, Mike McCorkle. Mike, stand up. Mike is my Democrat opponent from Wichita. Mike and I have some, when we get to these places, because he comes and participates, so I love it. I have always, tell Mike, I have always had a great relationship with all of my opponents that I've ever had. Never have I felt like I needed to go after them or make things tough. I think we truly miss an opportunity when we don't give somebody of a different mindset the opportunity to get to know each other. Because quite frankly, if we get to know each other, you may find out you actually like them, and if you like them, it's kind of hard to be mad at them. I mean, it truly is. And so, my friends here from the legislature, they will tell you that what the press writes a lot of times about us is not right. They love the press. You know, truly today, the press wants to get people stirred up. So they'll say things out there just to get people stirred up. But quite frankly, I have great conversations with my Democrat friends. And I think Scott would say the same thing, Clark, Stephen. We all try to work to get things done. So I would tell you, I don't know if there's any press here, but I can tell you the last time I did one of these was out in Plainville. And the Reflector, which I wouldn't call that the press, it's really a blog, and it's a nasty blog. I think if you read that and you were there, you would go, wow, I did not see what they saw. So that's just the way it goes. That's the way the press is today. They're going to pop things up so they can get clicks, and I guess maybe clicks pays them money. So that's the way things happen. So this morning, I was actually at breakfast with a lobbyist. His name's Darren Miller. He's with AT&T. He's in Wichita, and he wanted to talk about an issue that just came up with them. And so I went to breakfast with him. And during breakfast, he was talking about his experience with ChatGPT. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm probably one of the least technologically capable people on earth. Technology and I don't necessarily get along very well. And so I was talking to him, I said, you know, he was telling me all the things that he had asked ChatGPT and what it would spit out for him. So I said, hey, I got a meeting in Salina tonight. We're going to talk about Medicaid expansion. I said, what does ChatGPT say about why should Kansas not expand Medicaid? That was the question. Why should Kansas not expand Medicaid? And so this is what it spit out. So I told him, I said, email it to me, I'll print it off. And I was just amazed. It says, the debate over Medicaid expansion in Kansas, as in other states, involves various arguments both for and against the policy. Those who argue that Medicaid expansion is harmful for Kansas typically present the following points. Financial burden on the state. Number one, financial burden on the state. Opponents argue that while the federal government covers 90% of the cost, newly eligible employees under the expansion, 90% of the cost for newly eligible employees under the expansion, the remaining 10% still represents a significant financial burden on the state budget. This could potentially necessitate cuts to other state-funded programs or increases in taxes. Number two, increased dependency. Critics claim that expanding Medicaid encourages dependency on government assistance rather than promoting self-sufficiency. They argue that it could disincentivize work and personal responsibility among able-bodied adults without children, who make up a substantial portion of those eligible under expansion. Number three, strain on the healthcare providers. There is concern that an influx of Medicaid patients could overwhelm healthcare providers, especially in rural areas where there are already shortages of medical professionals. Medicaid generally reimburses at lower rates than private insurance, which might financially strain hospitals and clinics, potentially leading to reduced services or closures. Number 4, questionable long-term federal support. Skeptics point to the uncertainty of the long-term federal commitment. If future federal budgets reduce Medicaid funding, the state would need to cover more costs, exacerbating the financial pressures on the state. The crowd-out effect, number 5. Some argue that expanding Medicaid might lead individuals to drop private insurance in favor of the government program, thus shifting costs from private entities to the taxpayer-funded system. This could increase the overall cost to the state and federal governments without necessarily improving health outcomes. Number 6, bureaucratic and administrative challenges. Expanding Medicaid requires significant administrative changes and increased bureaucracy, which can be both costly and complex. There are concerns about the efficiency and effectiveness of the expanded system, managing the increased enrollment and ensuring adequate care. These arguments reflect concerns about fiscal responsibility, the role of government assistance, and the potential unintended consequences on the healthcare system and the state economy. When I read that, I go, wow, that's all those things I pretty much say most of the time. So I thought, well, I think you could probably put, why should Kansas expand Medicaid? And you would have a whole other set of things that would be said. So this is on the counter side. But I thought it was actually kind of unique because it is pretty correct. That is, most of those items are the things that are being said out there. So I start off, and Mike knows this because Mike's already been to one, I start off every time asking people, what is Medicaid expansion? So I'm going to ask this group, what is Medicaid expansion? Healthcare. Healthcare? What else? Who does it support?
Able-bodied workers.
That is true. Well, you know too much. I wasn't expecting you to say it. Most of the time, what people say is they'll say, and a lot of times I talk to smaller groups in this, sometimes only 15 or 20 people will show up. So it's always a special treat when you got 70, 80. Out there in Plainville, it was 168 people in that room, which was just amazing. But most of the time, people will say, Medicaid expansion is helping the frail and elderly, expanding services to the frail and elderly, expanding services to the disabled, expanding services to the IDD community, the intellectually and developmentally disabled community, expanding services to pregnant mothers, and the list goes on and on and on. And that's not what Medicaid expansion is. It doesn't do any of those. Not a single one of them. Medicaid expansion is what she said, it is expanding Medicaid to a new population. And that population is primarily childless adults aged 19 to 64. And it is 19 to 64. So when somebody says, oh, it's expanding to kids, I hear that all the time. Children, if we expand Medicaid, look at all the children that are going to be on Medicaid. Not true. It's not going to expand Medicaid to a single child because they already have it. They already have it. So children are covered under Medicaid up to 250% of the poverty level for their parents. So if their parents are less than 250% of the poverty level, then they're covered. And I remember back in around 2015-16, KHI, the Kansas Health Institute, was really tracking who was covered currently in Medicaid. And at that time, there was a huge push by the state government to get kids to the CHIPS program. It's called CHIPS, Children Health Insurance Program. So it's really a huge push to get as many of those kids who qualify onto the CHIPS program as they could get. And finally, at that time, KHI made a report and said, listen, we've done all we can do on that. all the kids that are going to come on right now are on. So they've done a pretty good job of advertising. I remember the advertising that went across the state trying to get kids on the program. They said the ones that are left, the ones that are not on there, have parents that truly do not want their children on any state programs. And so there are some kids out there that are still not on CHIPS, but those are typically with parents who do not believe that it's right to use the state programs to insure their kids. That's their choice. That's not my choice. That's not any of our choice. We provide the program. It's up to them to do what they want. So who are we currently insuring, or who do we currently take care of on Medicaid? And I want to go over that because we talked about what Medicaid expansion, the population that is going to be affected, it's a new population. But who do we currently cover? We currently cover about 13 different populations. We have the frail, we have the elderly, we have pregnant women up to 150% of the federal poverty level. We have mothers for 1 year after birth up to 150% of the federal poverty level. We have children below 250% of the poverty level. We have parents of children up to 38% of the poverty level. We have the disabled through the Social Security Administration. So if you're disabled and you're receiving disability, like my wife's an MS patient, she's homebound. She could be on there, but we make too much money for it, so she's not on there. But somebody that doesn't make very much money could be on there through the disabled, through the Social Security Administration. Those who are applying and are waiting for that disability determination, they are able to be on Medicaid currently. The physically disabled, I know the next one's going to be the intellectually and developmentally disabled, traumatic brain injuries, the blind, and children with autism. Those are all of the groups of people who are currently on our state Medicaid system. In addition, our state dollars support Medicaid through community mental health centers, through FQHCs. FQHCs are federally qualified health centers. We have lots of them. I think there's 19 of them around the state. And safety net clinics. In Wichita, one of the biggest safety net clinics is Guadalupe. It does not take any Medicaid dollars except what people that might come have, but they don't go out and look. We don't send them dollars. It would just be through the patients that come to them. So those are the people who are currently covered on Medicaid. So that's important to know. So one of the things that we have really tried to do, and it's important for us to do this, is really make sure that we take care of our safety net clinics. And so a lot of our money in that system will go to support federally qualified health centers and the safety net clinics. In addition, you've seen the rise of community mental health centers all across the state. There's like 26 of them right now. And every single one of them are participating in the Medicaid system. And so they're an important piece of that. So we talked about the population. And the population is an interesting population that would get Medicaid expansion. So when we talk about it, we say 19 to 64. We say able-bodied adults, meaning that they can work, and some of them do work. These people predominantly do not have kids, but some of them do. And of course they always say, well, those kids get on Medicaid through a Medicaid expansion. No, they're already eligible to be on CHIPS, and that's where they would go, is through CHIPS, not through Medicaid expansion. So anytime, and I hear it all the time, people will say, oh, kids will get on Medicaid expansion. No, they won't. 19 to 64, able-bodied adults. And here's the real kicker of it. We have since 2010 some people call it Obamacare, some people call it the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. I really don't care what you call it. It all means the same. But the Affordable Care Act provides coverage clear down to 100% in Kansas, 100% of the poverty level. So if you make 100% of the poverty level, you can't make under, you have to make over 100% of the poverty level, you can get on the Affordable Care Act, and it can be subsidized literally up to 95% of your out-of-pocket costs, where it just doesn't leave a whole lot for you to pay. But you have to work to get there. So how much is that? The federal poverty level for one individual is about $15,000. Actually, it's $14,585 or something like that. So I always just say $15,000. For a family of four, it's right around $27,000 to $28,000. But literally, if you will work, you can get on the ACA. And I say if you'll work. You know, there was a day not too long ago where we used to talk about the minimum wage. Minimum wage still is $7.25 in this state, and probably is not going to change. But who pays the minimum wage today? I don't know anybody that pays minimum wage. And probably one of the lowest paid workers across the state are child care workers. Believe it or not, they're very, very low, and we really need to fix that problem. But I think that there's some other things in regulation. I can get off into tangents. I don't want to do that. But those are making 10 to 11 bucks an hour. A person goes to McDonald's, and you're going to make $12 to $14 an hour at McDonald's. If it's Spangles, probably $15 an hour. So most people today are going to make at least that $12. I'm just going to say $12 an hour. Well, if you make $10 an hour and you work 28 hours a week, you make enough to hit the federal poverty level, and you make enough to be able to get on the ACA. And so that's the reason why I've said for a long, long time that truly the problem we have is getting people back to work. And we have to get people back to work. Today, we hear it at the state, in the House of Representatives and the Senate, we hear it all the time. Employers coming to us saying, we need 200 workers, and we can't find them. Today in this society, if you want a job, you can get a job. They're begging people to come to work. So go to work. And if you go to work, you don't need Medicaid expansion. So what's Medicaid expansion cost? Medicaid expansion, actually we started really working on this clear back in 2015. That was when we first, Aon, which is a huge consulting company, did the study for the state of Kansas. And I got a copy of that study. And I studied it a lot over a period of time. And they basically did it clear out to 2025. So I've got numbers clear out to 2025. But right now, if we were to expand Medicaid, the cost of the state, if we hit the numbers right, would probably be around somewhere $70 million our share, about $700,000, $800,000. That's not seven. I said $70 million. I said $70,000. $70 million our share, and somewhere around $700 to $800 million for the federal government. That's if we hit it correctly. The problem is not a single state hit it correctly. Not a single state. On average, the states who have expanded, and there's 40 states who have expanded, have missed it by about 95%. So on average, I'm saying. So some of them missed it as high as 200%, which was Colorado. Colorado missed it enormously bad, the number of people who were going to be on their Medicaid system. Some of them don't miss it so far. Some of them maybe miss it by 30 or 40%. But on average, they miss it 95%. So they tell us that there's 150,000 people out there in the state of Kansas who would qualify to be on Medicaid expansion. Of those 150,000, 30 to 40% of them will be taken off of their current coverage to go on Medicaid. They currently have coverage. And that's the sad part, whether they're covered through the ACA, whether they're covered through a group health plan, they have coverage. Maybe they're covered through a short-term medical plan, but they have coverage. They will be taken off and put on Medicaid, 30 to 40%. If we miss it by 95%, we're going to be at about 300,000. And instead of it costing us 70 million, it'll cost us more like 135 or 140 million. And that's just in the first year, and it's going to grow every year after that. It never goes down. It just continues to go up. We're always getting information from other states, and actually today there is lots of information out there about what's happened in other states. On average, their cost has went up over 40%, and that is sometimes very hard for them to handle. And I'll use a couple of really good pieces right now. One from a long time ago, 17 and 18, when Oregon decided to pass Medicaid expansion. The very next year, they raised taxes $300 million to pay for it. $300 million. That's your money. That was their money. If it was here, that'd be your money. Your money would be, you'd have to be taxed to pay for that. Kentucky right now had a huge, not Kentucky, Indiana. Indiana had a huge problem this year. They made some big mistakes in their caregiver program, which we have a caregiver program as part of Medicaid too. And they were over $1 billion, actually $1.2 billion in the hole on their Medicaid expansion. And so, what do you think that they did to cover that hole? The one thing that scares us the most is they didn't take it from the Medicaid expansion folks. They took the money, they took the benefits from those folks that were actual caregivers for the frail and elderly or the disabled or the IDD, whoever they are. They took their benefits away from them to fill that hole, which is what scares us to death about the whole Medicaid expansion, because why would you not take it from Medicaid expansion? These are people that really should be working. They really should. But why would you not? Well, it's a math problem. Medicaid expansion, the federal government pays 90% of it. But those other people, they only pay 60% of it. Well, they're going to take it from those who pay, that they're going to have to pay the least. That's where they're going to take it from. And so we say that all the time here, is if this happens, if we expand Medicaid and those problems exist, the people who need it the most, the people that Medicaid was meant for, are going to pay the cost. And it's not just when problems happen, it's a lot different. So I'm going to tell you another story. Stories are great. So I was talking to the Pachyderm Club in Topeka. It was during session, probably maybe 3 years ago. And it was a room filled, kind of like this room's filled. There was a lot of people there. The guy sitting right beside me, it was packed, and so there wasn't a lot of room, and I was standing in the front, but I would have been standing right by that table. And this guy was sitting beside me, and I started telling this story. I said, one of our problems with Medicaid expansion is it's going to force the people who need it the most out. And I said, you're going to ask me how's that happen? Well, number one, you have to understand that our reimbursement levels for Medicaid are so low that nobody really wants to take it. They're extremely low. For instance, a 99213 code, which is just a normal code to go to the doctor's office visit, and if you look at your EOB, sometimes look at the codes and you'll see a 99213. That's just a normal office visit. That costs about $120 if you're paying cash. if you're paying cash. If you're paying for it with insurance, the insurance is going to discount it down to about $90 to $85. So that's what it costs if you've got insurance. If you got Medicaid, it's going to get it down around $70. And if you've got, or Medicare is going to get it down around $70. If you've got Medicaid, I said, it's going to be around 40, and there was a doctor sitting there. I didn't know it was a doctor, and he said, you're wrong. He said, it's $25. He said, that's how much I get to serve a Medicaid patient. And so he kind of quieted down then, and I went on. I said, so here's what happens is the doctors, they can't make enough money to live on if they've got a whole panel of nothing but Medicaid patients. And so what they do is they limit the amount of Medicaid that they'll take. And it's generally somewhere between 10 or 15% of their patient mix can be Medicaid. And that's it. No more. So I said, we throw 150,000 people in this system, and these people are aged 19 to 64. They're mobile. They know how to use a phone. They know how to use a computer. They know how to contact people, and they are going to find a doctor that will serve them. And that poor person that's 90 years old that has to be hauled around because they're just frail now, and they don't have the cognitive ability to search, are going to be forced out. So I said, the people that we have said it's important for Medicaid to serve are going to be the people that are going to be hurt the most. And I finished with that. And the doctor stood up and he says, now I want to tell you something. He says, number one, I've heard nobody ever say that. Not a single person has ever made that argument before. And he said, this guy has just told you the truth of what's going to happen. And he said, it will happen. And he said, we're going to watch it happen if Medicaid expansion happens. Because it can only happen that way. Because there's just not, it just doesn't pay enough. It does not pay enough for us to be able to give services. The guy said, I might as well just do it for free. Because at $25, it costs me more in labor to do the billing and all of the stuff that we have to do to get paid for Medicaid. I might as well just do it for free. So don't give me a Medicaid expansion. And I go, hallelujah. I didn't know how correct I was, but he told me how correct I was. So that's one of the issues that we have to deal with when we're looking at, are we going to do something? And what is the unintended consequence to the people that we're going to do it to? So do you really want to put able-bodied adults who can work, who can go out there and get coverage in front of the people that need it the most? I bet you 90% of you will say, no, we shouldn't do that. Some people say we should, and that's okay. I'm not here to argue with you. That argument will happen in the State House over the next several years. This argument is not going to end. It's not going to stop. And it's not going to stop until the federal government figures out what they're going to do. Another problem we have is, and this is written in many of the articles of the day back in 2010 through about 14. One of them was an article written about what Obama said about his Medicaid expansion. And he said at the time, he said, we will not be able to continue to support this long term with the federal government paying 90%. At some point in time, we're going to have to change it to what we call the FMAP, which is a 60-40 split, which where we're currently at on all of the Medicaid that we currently have in our state. Right now it's about 60-40, and it'll change a little bit more. We were at 55-45 for quite a while, and the whole COVID mess changed how they figured those formulas, and they gave us a lot more money for quite a while. That is done now. We're not getting that free money anymore. So at some point in time, when they do that, can you imagine we're going to go from 90% just to 60%? That's 30% increase. So we're talking about the state's portion, instead of being $7 million, be somewhere around 250 to 300 million. And anybody that's been on the Appropriations Committee or the Ways and Means Committee, if JR was here, JR would tell you, Stephen's on appropriation, that would wreak havoc with our budget, wouldn't it, Stephen? It would literally wreak havoc. And so we have to think about that, and we continue to think about that, and other states are thinking about it too. You know, if you're Indiana and you have $1 billion hole and you got to fill it, it's severe. It's really severe, the things that you have to do to fill that hole. So that's where we're really at on Medicaid expansion. We have to make sure that people understand what's going on, how it's going to affect us, and then is it truly something we want to do? And right now, I will tell you, in the House of Representatives, and I think my friends would probably tell you I'm correct, I know exactly what the vote is. People will say, well, why don't you bring it to the floor for a vote? Well, I can tell you what the vote is, and the vote is 54, and the rest against. And I know who those 50 are. Guarantee you I know exactly who they are. It's all the Democrats, and then about 10 to 12 of our members on the Republican side. So 100% of the Democrats want it, and 10 to 12 on our side. And so I always tell them, we don't bring anything up on the floor to fail. Randall, you ever bring anything up on the floor of the Senate to fail? You don't. If you know it's going to fail, you don't bring it up. And we don't either. Once in a while we do fail though, don't we? Once in a while we bring something up and we get surprised and it fails. It doesn't have the votes. But it's not because we wanted to kill it, it's because we didn't know that it didn't have the votes. And so that's the way I'm at, that's where I'm at on Medicaid expansion right now. There is not the votes in the House to pass it. So we did have a hearing this year. We had a hearing in the Health Committee, and of course, I loved some of the crassive things that they said about that it was a joke. Well, it wasn't a joke. You know, there were people that were very serious on both sides that came in and talked about the issues on both the Senate and the House. And the House had a vote. And the vote, it did not make it out of committee. But we did have the hearings. We have not had it on the floor. You have an order, it goes through a hearing, it has to pass out of that hearing and go to the floor. And it's interesting that we hear the governor talk all the time about this bill did not go through regular order, but she wants Medicaid expansion to not go through regular order. Why don't you take it straight to the floor? Well, that's not what you say on everything else that you veto because it didn't go through what you call regular order. So I'm usually amazed at our governor when she talks about something like that. And if it's something she wants, it doesn't need to go through regular order. But if it's something that she doesn't want, it better go through regular order. Because if it didn't, she's going to veto it. So one of those nuances that we have in the House, and I'm certain in the Senate. And I don't know, I got to tell you guys, I don't know a whole lot about the Senate. Randall was in the Senate for 4 years, and so he knows about Senate. But those of us on the House side, we just kind of like being in the House, don't we? Well, we kind of like what we do in the House, and so we don't have some of the issues that the Senate has. The Senate's a pretty tough place this year, really is for a lot of different things. So at this time, I think it's probably about time to start doing some questions. I did want to talk just a little bit while they're gathering them. I want to talk a little bit about tax. Because what a great opportunity to talk about tax and kind of let you know where we're at. This situation that we're in this year has been amazing from a lot of different standpoints. We have passed in the House 4 different bills, tax bills. 2 of them passed with a unanimous vote, 2 weeks apart. 1 week we did Senate Bill 300, passed it with 123 to 0. something that's never happened in the House of Representatives. I talked to one of the lobbyists that's been there 50 years, and he said, I've never seen a tax bill pass unanimously in either body. So 123, think about that. We have 125, 2 people were missing, 2 people were absent. We had 123 people that voted for a tax bill. And that tax bill was a wonderful tax bill. And for my Democrat friends, if you'll go talk to the Democrats in the House, you will find out that they love that tax bill. They all voted for it. We loved it too. Most of the time, when you have a tax bill, somebody on both sides are going to vote against it. It's not going to be unanimous. That's how much work that we put into it. It failed. A week later, we came out with another one. Can't remember the number. 2036? I think that's what it was. Yeah, right around there. It's hard to remember numbers. But we came out with another one the very next week. Passed 119 to 0 out of the House. So 2 weeks in a row, we passed tax bills that had income tax relief, had property tax relief, it had Social Security tax relief, it had,
Accelerating food sales tax.
was that food sales tax? There was some more stuff in there, little stuff, but it had everything that you would want. And so that one actually did pass both the House and the Senate, went to the governor, and she vetoed it. So then we're down to the very end of session, and we passed the last tax bill that we passed, which is Senate Bill 37. And that's the one she vetoed last week. It had much the same as what House Bill 2036 had, except we knew that the governor had told us that it was too expensive. 2036 was too expensive by $35 million. And so we started work really fast to try to get down to what she said she would sign. We got within $3 million. $3 million. Do you realize $3 million in our world is a rounding error? Now, for me personally, $3 million is a lot of money. But up there, when you're talking about a $25 billion budget, we were within $3 million. And that day, the estimates for April at that time came out, and we had just went over $100 million over what they estimated we would have in the month of April. You know how many years at $3 million you could go with that $100 million that we just had? Forever. And the governor said, no, it's too expensive, and she vetoed it. Vetoed it last week. And now, what we're doing, we're waiting for the governor to tell us when we're going to come back and work on another tax bill. She said that we're not serious about what we do. I can tell you our people are very serious. And I don't care whether it's on the Democrat side or the Republican side. We are serious. When you have 123 people in the House of Representatives all vote together, we're serious. And we believe what we're doing. We do not understand why the governor did what she did. And all you have to do is go on to Facebook and look for Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer is a Democrat, good friend of mine. Love Tom Sawyer. He is the ranking Democrat. And the reason why I say that is because you'll believe me, most of you, but those that don't believe me, go look what Tom says, because you will believe him, because he is a Democrat. He has been out there working tirelessly, trying to let people know that what we did in Senate Bill 37 was a good deal. You know, the governor gives all kinds of information out. She's got the bully pulpit. She gets to say whatever she wants. We only get to say what the press will print, and that's not very much. The press doesn't give us the same opportunity that they give the governor. So the governor can go out and say whatever she wants. We can rebut it, but that doesn't mean they're going to print it. And they don't. They don't print it. So we have to do it by getting it out on Facebook, getting it out through newsletters, and that's the reason why it's so important for our members to do newsletters because they can get that information out to you. So if you have not been getting the newsletter from your rep, you need to get it. They're doing it. They're doing it every single week that we're up there, or most of them are. So be sure to get those newsletters because you're going to get information that you're not going to get. But Tom Sawyer put a piece out on Facebook here a couple weeks ago that basically started at 0 and showed how much people were going to get in tax relief from Senate Bill 37. And you had to get to around, I think it was around 25 to 30,000 before you paid any taxes. And the governor said, well, you're giving money away to the top and not to the bottom. Not true. The bottom actually got the most. In some cases, 100% tax relief. They were paying taxes and now they wouldn't have to pay taxes. And Tom went a step farther and put percentages of how much people got. And when you got to $1 million, that person got 2-point-something percent. I can't remember, 2.5%, 2.1, somewhere around there. Whereas the person on the bottom side got 100% tax relief. And so what the governor says out there is just disingenuous. It's absolutely disingenuous. And if you're listening to everything that she says, you've got to go out and check it. Because it's not true. And our Democrat friends are even saying that. What she's saying is not true. And they can prove it with figures. So I truly applaud the members of the House of Representatives across the board. Democrat, Republican, all of them have done a great job on working to get their people tax relief. Now, we're just one signature. We're always just one signature away from getting it, and that's the governor. Either we have to get the governor to sign it, or we have to get an override of the governor's veto. And an override of the governor's veto has been rather elusive for us because of 3 individuals, 3 Republicans in the Senate that will not support what should be a good deal if they're going to support the governor. And there's a lot to that. There's a lot to unpack there, but what it really is just a couple of people who literally hate everything that's happened to them personally, and so now they're on the governor's side, and they're going to support the governor to the death. I mean, as long as the governor says don't support it, they're not going to support it. I can't do anything about that. Randall, if he was there, he can't do anything about that. Rest of the Republicans are doing just fine. We've got 2 that are they're stopping everything. So, I wanted to say that about the tax because I think it's important for everybody to know exactly what's happening on tax and just how hard people are working on across the board, whether it's the Republican side, the Democrat side, and we're going to continue to work until we get it done. Literally, we'll stay there and continue to work until we get tax relief. You got the questions? Questions. Time for questions.
You said this was fun, right?
Yeah, well, it can be fun.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Out loud. All right. Question number 1. Sorry, I have a bigger mouth than the speaker, apparently. There is a group called Kansans First who are advocating for Medicaid expansion. Many in this group are aligned with Governor Kelly. On their website, it says, quote, "We need the legislature to pass Medicaid expansion in Kansas." Their website also says, "In truth, the United States government cannot afford this either. Is this a moral hazard to expand this program when it is known that we cannot afford it?"
Well, I was wondering where that was going when you were reading it. I'm going, that's a little bit of a gotcha. But actually, I read that. Somebody had sent that to me, and so I went to that website and read it, and I go, wow. So they're saying on one side, we have to have Medicaid expansion. And these are people that support the government. Believe me, they're supporting the government. We have to have Medicaid expansion. But if we do it at our own peril, and probably at some point in time, we're going to pay a big price for it. It is at that point, it's a moral issue. If you know something is going to go bad, and it's just a matter of time, why would you do it? And that's what this group was saying, and actually I was surprised. I was truly surprised when I saw that quote on there, because normally you would not see a Medicaid advocate, because those are Medicaid expansion advocates, saying the truth. And the truth is, Medicaid expansion is, do it at your own peril, because when you do it, someday you're going to pay a price, and who pays that price? You and I, our tax dollars pay the price. You know, it's like, I go back to in 18 when Oregon passed Medicaid expansion, and the very next year they had to raise $300 million. Ohio, the state of Ohio, when they did Medicaid expansion, within 2 years, they were $5 billion in the hole, and they had to pump it up, and they did. They did. They cut services. They cut services to folks, and then they raised taxes to pay for the rest of it. So when you do it, just realize, I hope the people who want it are willing to pay as much as what they're going to have to pay, because it's going to cost. It's going to cost dearly.
This one's much shorter. Much shorter question. Can illegal aliens get Medicaid coverage?
Well, by law, no, they can't. However, the Biden administration has, by executive order, changed that. By law, they can't. You have to be a U.S. citizen to get it. But believe me, that is not the case. All you got to do is go to California and Arizona, and you're going to see a lot of illegal aliens getting Medicaid. They can't. But they're not supposed to.
This question has to do with the term able-bodied workers.
Yeah.
If expansion covers able-bodied workers, how many hours must a person work to qualify for the expansion, and who determines what able-bodied means?
Man, I'm glad you asked that question. That's a good thing about taking questions, is sometimes you forget to say some things during your talk that you really wanted to say and you just forgot. So able-bodied adults, that is not my definition. It's not what I decided to call these folks. That is actually in the federal statute. It's able-bodied adults, and it's actually not defined all that well. And there is no hour requirement. So the governor, I really meant to say this, so I'm glad you asked that. Whoever asked that, thank you. So the governor put in her Medicaid expansion bill this year a work requirement, first time she ever did. And I was actually kind of surprised when she did, because our governor is against work requirements. Every single piece of legislation that we've done that's had work requirements in it, our governor has tried to veto it. And back when she was a senator, she fought against all work requirements. We have work requirements for TANF, which is the welfare, for our food stamp program. We have work requirements, and they're work requirements. These are real work requirements, with hours, number of hours that you have to work. But her work requirement that she put in her Medicaid expansion bill this year basically says that once a year you have to certify that you've been paid once. And it does not have to be a certain number of hours. Nowhere in her legislation does it say that you had to work 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. Actually, all she says is you have to produce one paycheck for the year, and we will certify that you have worked. So maybe just 1 hour. There's nothing in there that says anything else. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing work requirement? One place over that said it was a joke. It was the biggest joke the governor's ever done. And of course, the Reflector had fun with that one, but I'll say it again, it's a joke. That is not a work requirement. It is absolutely not. And then she puts like 5 different exceptions in her work requirement, with the last one being the best. And that is, the exception is anything that the Secretary of KDHE says is good. It's an exception. No definition, no nothing. If the Secretary of KGHE says that you get an exception, you get an exception. No definition whatsoever. So is that work requirement really a work requirement? No, it's not a work requirement. It's a joke.
Voters in Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Missouri have voted to have Medicaid expansion. Given that citizens in Kansas likely would vote like our rural neighbors, why are the legislative leaders so dead set against allowing the House and Senate to vote on this issue?
I think I answered that actually during my speech. We do not, never do we bring a bill to the floor to kill it. We never want to do that. And I can tell you right now, there are 50 votes in the House of Representatives for it. You gotta have 63, so they're 13 short. It would die. And we're not gonna bring it to the House floor and kill it. And so that is the reason why it's never been on the House floor. Actually, so that question said Missouri, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. Do you know how all three of those got that? They got it through what's called a referendum. It wasn't through the legislature. The legislature did not do anything on those three states. The state of Kansas does not have a referendum, and thank God we don't. Because if we did, we'd have Medicaid expansion right now. You're right. We would. By referendum, I guarantee you we would have it. There would be enough people to go out there. Because it's about, here's what's interesting. I never will forget, this will explain what I'm just about to say. I never will forget when the first poll came out on Medicaid expansion. It was done by the American Cancer Society, their Cancer Action Network is what it's called. They did the very first poll. And when I got the poll, and I read it, I go, how can that be? How can 60% of people say that they support Medicaid expansion? How can that be? Because I had done a poll too, and it didn't even come close to showing that. And so I called, her name was Hillary G., fine young lady that worked for me. I called Hillary and I said, Hillary, I said, could you send me that poll? I want to see the questions that are asked and then the percentages of the answers, you know, how people voted. And she sent it to me, and after I read it, I realized how they got it. If I didn't know what I know, I would have said yes too. Everybody would have said yes. If you don't know what they're doing, you would automatically say, of course we want to do this. And that's what happened in Nebraska, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Through a referendum, those people blindly followed whoever was supporting that and pushing it, blindly followed and passed it. And then the legislatures had absolutely no way to stop it. They had to do it. Their referendum process is a constitutional process. So it actually goes into their constitution. So it's there, it's done. Now they have to react and try to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And they're paying for it. I mean, they have to. They have to raise the taxes and do everything they have to. That's the thing. That's the reason why I do what I do. You may not agree with me. I know Mike doesn't agree with me. I don't mind it that Mike doesn't. Mike's a good guy. We just disagree on this issue. But I feel like it's my job to go across the state to people who want me to be there, to tell them the facts of what's going to happen if we do this. And you can go and read on other states what's happened. Some states actually love what they're doing, like California. California was so, they were over $10 billion in the hole on their Medicaid. But California doesn't care. They just tax their residents even more, which is the reason why California has such a massive outward migration to Texas and Florida. Those people are tired of paying the taxes that they have to pay in California. So I do it actually because I believe it's my duty to go across. I've been the one that studied this. It's my duty to go across the state and tell. You know, the Reflector here, back when they wrote their stupid little article on me, said, why would he go to Plainville? Why didn't he just go to Wichita where he's at? Because Linda Adam asked me to go to Plainville. She was at the State House and she says, Dan, would you come to Plainville and talk? And I said, absolutely. We have to find the right time. So I'm at Plainville. She comes to me and she says, Dan, would you come to Salina and talk? Absolutely, I'll come and talk. But I just don't show up here. I'm asked to be here. And I think it's the right thing to do. You have to know. And those that don't agree with me, I appreciate how you guys are acting tonight. I appreciate the fact that you aren't just trying to tear me up. I appreciate it. I know who does. I know the ones that don't like. I've known Randall for 8 to 10 years now. I know he doesn't like what I'm doing, but he doesn't hate me for it. Or at least I don't think he hates me for it. So I think it's my job to come out here and talk and let you know.
A couple of these have been answered already, but there are 3 questions on this card. Would Medicaid expansion endorse controlled population or euthanasia?
No. I would say, I'm not saying it couldn't be written in. It could. You could write it in to do that. It's never been put in anything we've seen so far. So you can write whatever you want, and if you can get 63 people in the House and 21 in the Senate and the governor to sign it, you can do whatever you want. That's our math. 63, 21, and 1. So if they wanted it, they could, but I think there's probably some problems in the federal statute too that would probably preclude that. And the same thing goes with abortion. Using state dollars, there's a Hyde Amendment out there on the federal government side that still is kind of that problem that stops the feds from being able to allow Medicaid dollars to go for abortion. When the Hyde Amendment goes, then that will probably happen too. And I know they've tried to kill the Hyde Amendment on the federal government side, but it's never happened yet. So if the Hyde Amendment goes, you will see Medicaid providing money for abortion, but not yet. Not as long as we have the Hyde Amendment.
This may be a short answer, or not, for the Speaker of the House.
I can make it long.
Has socialized medicine worked anywhere in the world?
Yeah, so that's one of those things. If you love the idea of socialized medicine, maybe you would say it has. But I would say no, it hasn't. It's not worked well. And here is the reason why I'll say that. In Great Britain right now, they're really in a mess. I was reading, it's been during the session. There was an article came out, and of course I went and did some checking real quick to see how prevalent it was, and actually the next day or two it came up on TV. I can't remember what station I was watching, but the issue came up. Great Britain, their system is crumbling. Canada, if you talk to somebody that just needs to go to the doctor to have a cold taken care of, or the flu, or something like that, you can get into the doctor pretty quick. If you want an MRI, maybe 3 months. If you got to have brain surgery, you're probably going to come to America to get your brain surgery done, and you're not going to wait a year or year and a half in Canada. So it depends what's wrong, how well socialized medicine works. On the easy stuff, it probably works pretty well. But on the more complex things like cancers and brain tumors and things that take a lot of skill and a lot of money, most of those people are actually not going to wait in Canada. They're going to come to America. So does it work? Yeah. Sometimes not. I will tell you, I went to Taiwan this last October, and I got to go. It was fun. It was a fun trip. It was I led a delegation of 5 legislators, and I geeked out at the health ministry. I told them, I said, I want to go to the health ministry. I want to talk to their secretary of health. They don't call him secretary, but whatever they call him. The head of their health and human services. And literally I did. I geeked out. They got kind of an interesting system. that's not like anything else I've seen or heard of. And I kind of wonder if, could it work? Might be able to, but Americans aren't like anybody else in this world. We want what we want, and we want it when we want it, and many of us are willing to pay for what we want. So here's how their system works. Their system, everybody is on health care, and it's a base plan. They have a base plan. And the employer pays 60% of the cost, the employee pays 30% of the cost, and the government pays 10% of the cost. And everybody is on the plan. I said, well, what about somebody that's not working? They said, well, you got to understand, in Taiwan, we don't have unemployment. People work. People work into their 70s and 80s. It's different than America. We know we're different than America. People work. So we don't have that problem of people laying around not working and want us to give them, services for free. So he says, we don't have that issue. And he said, if we did, usually it's a very short term. It's very, very quick. They're off. They change jobs, they move, and they're right back on. So if they're off more than a month, it'd be amazing. I said, so what does that cover? He said, well, it covers all of your basic stuff. And then if you want something better, you can buy a supplemental policy. So I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, so drugs, cancer treatment, what all does it cover? And he told me, he says, listen, all of the drugs that you all get, we don't get those. Says, we just can't afford them. And so they're not in our formula. Those expensive drugs that cost $4,000 a month, our people are not getting those. He said, but the main drugs, those 500 or 600 drugs that are just kind of mainstream drugs, we get all of those. And very inexpensive. We have price control on the drugs. We'll only let those drug manufacturers charge so much for the drugs that are delivered to our people. So I said, so do you think something like that would work in America? And he says, probably not. He said, and they understand. They are really friends of America. The Taiwanese love America. They love Americans. They love freedom. They are freedom-loving people. But they've got this health plan that works for them. But their people are very compliant. It's the difference between us and them. We are not compliant people. They are. When they're told to do something, they do it. If they're told to put a mask on, they put a mask on. We don't want to put masks on. Heck, I hated masks. I was one of those that fought it. I did it. Clark did it. We didn't like it. We didn't want them on, but we did it because we needed to. They just do it. So it's a different people. Taiwanese are different people than Americans. And so something that works there probably never would work here, simply because we just wouldn't let it work. It could, but we just wouldn't let it work. That was a long answer to a short answer.
I stand corrected. If Medicaid expansion is so negative, why is it supported by League of Kansas Municipalities, Kansas Hospital Association, Kansas County Commissioners Association, cities like Russell, Pittsburgh, Kansas Physicians, a whole list of things?
Yeah, I got one answer for you. It is the best answer. My members have heard me say it. In Topeka and in this state, we say, if it wasn't for self-interest, there'd be no interest at all. And there's self-interest there. How do I say that? Hospitals. Why do you think hospitals want it? Because it's money. Lots of money. Massive amount of money. I'm going to give you some figures that it's going to blow your mind. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. The Hospital Association is controlled by the top 10 hospitals. And the top 10 hospitals get 55% of all Medicaid dollars. The top 2 hospitals, KU and Via Christi and Wichita, get 25% of all dollars. Those poor little rural hospitals that Medicaid expansion is going to save get 6.3% of all dollars. How's it going to save them? This is gonna be fun for you, because you've never heard this. Even the people that may be educated on Medicaid expansion. Ottawa County get $5,400. Sheridan County Health, $8,707. Washington County Health, $10,000. This is per year, by the way. That's not per month. This is per year. Prairie View Hospital, $17,000. Mercy Hospital in Mound Ridge, $24,000. Rollins County Hospital, $28,000. Greeley County Hospital, $31,000. Bristol Memorial Hospital, $34,000. Decatur County Hospital, $35,000. Jewell County, $37,000. Stafford County, $39,000. Kiowa District, $42,000. Ashland, $43,000. Ness County Hospital, $44,000. Osborne, $45,000. Lane, $46,000. Logan County Hospital, $46,000. Stanton County Hospital, $62,000. Edwards County Hospital, $69,000. The list goes on and on and on. You get up to bigger areas. Sabetha County Hospital gets $204,000. I'll jump on up to Kearney County Hospital, gets $457,000. But here's the good part. KU, $68 million. Via Christi, $38 million. Wesley Medical Center, $34 million. Stormont Vale, $27 million. Shawnee Mission, $15 million. St. Francis, $10 million. Lawrence Memorial, $10 million. Olathe, $8 million. $9 million. Providence Medical Center, $9 million. Overland Park, $6 million. Hayes Medical, $5 million. Kansas Spine Hospital, $5 million. Promise Regional, $5 million. Via Christi Hospital, Pittsburgh, $4 million. Neosho Memorial Hospital, $3 million. And Atchison, $3 million. And that's that top 10 that gets $55 million. It's money. But they say, do they ever talk about the top 10? Never. They'll never tell you anything about the top 10. They talk about rural hospitals. That's what they talk about, rural hospitals. And you just heard what the rural hospitals get. 6.3% of all monies that go to hospitals go to the rural hospitals. So are they going to save rural hospitals? Never. Not a chance. And I got some information for you on that. So let's start with Independence. Independence Hospital was the very first hospital that closed. Wow, it's back in maybe 16 or 17. Of course, the governor at the time was a senator, and she came out and said, you know, if Medicaid expansion was here, Independence would stay. Then it won't, and here's why. Nobody wanted to go to Independence Hospital. You know where they went? They went to Wichita, they went to Bartlesville, they went to Pittsburgh, but they did not go to Independence Hospital. And even the CEO at the time said, if Medicaid expansion would be here, it might stay open maybe 3 more months. We just can't make it. Nobody wants to come here. So how do you keep a hospital open? But it was a great piece for Medicaid expansion. Oh, we need Medicaid expansion. It's going to save the hospital. So then, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Fort Scott came along, and Fort Scott closed. And again, at that time, the governor was the governor, and she said, Medicaid expansion was here, Fort Scott would stay open. So I started doing some checking on Fort Scott. Fort Scott so let's just do a little bit of math with you. If you are losing $13 million a year, and I give you $2 million, you stay open? That's Fort Scott. Fort Scott was losing anywhere from $13 to $15 million a year. And Medicaid expansion, because Fort Scott was the major provider, the hospital provider in that area, would have got $2 million. And immediately when they closed, CEO from Mercy Corporation, Mercy Hospital Corporation said, don't say it. Don't say Medicaid expansion would have saved us, because it won't. There's no way. We're just losing too much money. We can't make it. So that's what's happening to all. Here, not too long ago, it's been 2 years ago maybe, Harrington closed a year ago. Again, they didn't have the money to pay their debt. They literally had $1.5 million in debt, and they did not have the money to be, that's in your area, isn't it? Yeah, they didn't have the money to pay their debt, so they couldn't stay open. But I was thinking about Hillsborough. Hillsborough Hospital was going to go under. And they're the same way. The problem is they don't have anybody coming. And if you don't have people there to serve, how do you keep something open? You know, there was a deal come out today. I don't know how many of you paid attention to Jerry Moran announced the bill that he has just introduced in the Senate, the U.S. Senate. We've known about it. We've known that it's coming for a while. And the whole purpose of that bill is to help rural communities change the way they deliver health care. We no longer need a 25-bed hospital. We need a 2-bed hospital or a 3-bed hospital with an emergency room and with primary care physicians there to help take care of that community. That's what we need. That's what this bill is going to do. This bill that he has just introduced is going to start the change in rural health care. And so I got calls saying, hey, what do you think of what Jerry's doing? Yeah, well, I've been waiting for it. Thank God he finally introduced it. Because we do need to do what we need to do to take care of our rural health care situation. And the only way we can do that is to change. You cannot, you know, when I was born in 1960, I'm 63 years old, my mom was in the hospital for 3 days. That was normal back then. Today, they're barely in it for 24 hours on having a baby. You can go and have a heart surgery and be out within 4 days. You can have a hip replaced and be out before the day's over. You can have shoulder surgery and be out before the day's over. You can be out within 2 hours. People aren't going to the hospital. They're going to these other centers, these surgical centers that are actually taking up the big money. And the hospitals are left taking care of very, very sick people that doesn't pay, like a surgery. December, on December 4th, I had a surgery. I had 2 torn rotator cuffs. Guess how much they billed me for that? $77,000. I was astonished. Now that's before discount, but I'm still fighting with them because they still haven't got the discounts right. $77,000. And that's a surgical center. That's not the hospital. The hospitals are not getting the good stuff. They're getting the bad stuff, which puts them in an even worse position. Our whole healthcare system is really in a mess. Why are hospitals hurting so dang bad? They can't get enough nurses. And nurses, the lifeblood of the hospital, you have to have them. And so nurses are traveling nurses today, and instead of them paying $50,000 to $60,000 for a nurse, they're having to pay traveling nurses at the rate of close to $100,000 a year. It just makes it impossible. Our health system has to change. It truly has to change. It cannot survive. And Medicaid expansion is not going to save it. The health system has to change. And I'm not sure that we in the state can do that. It's going to take more. It's going to take help from our federal government to do that. It really is.
How much time do we have left, Rosemary? I wasn't sure.
It's 10 till 8.
I don't know that this will take 10 minutes, but I was wrong before. This has to do with the caregiver program you mentioned. Do we currently allow family members to be paid to care for their elderly parents? And if so, what is the name of that program?
Yeah, I can't tell you the name of that program. There is a program. It's actually a part, I think it may be a part of the HCBS waiver. In that HCBS waiver, there's like 7 or 8 pieces to it. And part of that piece, so the whole premise of the HCBS waiver is to keep people out of the nursing home. because the nursing home is the most expensive place to have somebody stay. It truly is. And talk about another bad model, business model. I would not be in the nursing home business no matter what today. It's impossible. It's impossible for them to make money. Assisted living centers is nothing. Assisted living centers are doing pretty good, but not nursing homes. And so the ACBS waiver is to keep people out of the nursing home, and there is a piece in there for caregivers, and typically you see it on disabled, people that just can't take care of themselves, or extremely frail elderly people. So it's inside. I can't tell you what the actual name inside it is, but it is, I think it's just a caregiver inside the ACBS waiver. So, you know, if you want to know just a little bit more about that, call KDHE. Probably it would be the best place to call and say, give me more information about that, because that's where we go. KDHE is the one that handles all, and KDADS also, handles all of the incoming applications and everything for Medicaid currently.
This, I'm going to let you answer this, even though I'm a pastor and I'd love to. If you are a Christian, how can you oppose Jesus' admonition to care for the least of these, my brethren, whether or not they work?
Well, gosh, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. I'm a Christian. If you're a Christian, how can you believe in abortion? How can you believe in killing a baby? You can't. I don't think so. So Jesus didn't say, lay on your butt and not work. What did Jesus said? Go out and take care of yourself. And if you work and if you take care of yourself, you will provide for yourself. And I believe Jesus does provide for us every single day, but he doesn't just say don't do anything. Where in the Bible are you going to find where Jesus said it's okay not to do anything and to have everybody else provide for you? The Bible doesn't say that. And so to use that as something to say that I think I'm a Christian, I believe I'm a Christian, I pray every single day. But to say that just because I believe people should work, that makes me not a Christian? Well, I think it probably makes me a Christian, and quite frankly, the people who want abortion aren't Christians. But I am not your keeper. I am not your judge. That's God's job. So, do I judge somebody that believes that abortion's okay? I don't judge them. Never have, never will. I just think that when you say that, you say it on one side, but you don't live it on the other side. So you really, truly need to think about that when you say that.
This is a long question. I'm going to condense it a little bit. This comes from a healthcare worker, a co-worker that has experience with medical claims, and right now, as it stands, the process for Medicaid claims, Medicaid claims process is a nightmare. Both Medicaid and Medicare are dealing with some improprieties right now. How do you see transferring this over, not just to the federal, but the state side? Is that going to cause more of the nightmare?
Got to think about that one. So, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe now, I'm trying to think of where I was at. Probably 16. In 16, up till 16, we did not have a consistent inspector general for Medicaid. And Vicki Schmidt, who is now, she was a senator back then, she is now the insurance commissioner. Her and I worked very, very hard that year to make sure that we got an inspector general that actually did something, because for so long nothing happened in that office. And so our first one was, we were actually a part of the hiring process. It's actually in the Attorney General's office, but we recommended that they hire Sarah Fertig. And Sarah Fertig was in that position for probably 3 or 4 years before she moved over to Medicaid, to the Medicaid side, and became the director, what is that called? The Medicaid director, became the Medicaid director. So she was the head of Medicaid. But she had a lot of good experience first in the Inspector General's office. And so that's really that's our first line of defense. And actually, it's a pretty good sized office. We have not only an Inspector General that probably has a staff of probably 10 or 12 employees, but then we have another unit of Medicaid that works on nothing but fraud. So they're looking at claims and seeing if fraud is happening in the claims process. So those are really our part of our bureaucracy, really, in the state to make sure that our Medicaid system is not defrauded. And they do a lot. They do a lot of work, and they find much more money in fraud than what it costs to have them on our staff. It's millions every year that they detect in fraud. So Medicaid is a very complex system. It's a federal-state partnership. So the federal provides the majority of the money, like I said, 60%, but they also provide lots and lots of regulations that we have to follow. And then we have our own regulations as well in the Medicaid system. And so it's truly a partnership between the federal and the state. The one thing that came out here a while back that I just don't agree with, and I'll tell you, if I don't agree with something, I'm going to call it out. But somebody said, if we had Medicaid expansion, the fraud is going to go through the roof. I don't believe that. I don't think it has anything to do with fraud. Will there be some fraud? Sure. But there's not going to be more fraud in the Medicaid expansion side than there would be in our current Medicaid structure. So that was something that was thrown out, and when it was thrown out, I go, I don't agree with that. That's just not true. So I'm not really worried about that happening because we already have people working in that area to make sure that our Medicaid system is free as best we can of fraud, and it's just an ongoing process. They are working at that day in and day out, every day of the year. And they do a good job. It's a big job. It's truly a tough job. Probably didn't answer your question, but I think that's as close as I can get to answering that question.
I believe this is going to be the last one. Is that good? This builds upon what we were talking about earlier with setting the vote for Medicaid expansion. And the question here says, with 90% of Kansans supportive, surplus of $2.8 billion, 1.7 in the rainy day fund, why will you not allow a debate to happen on this issue?
Yeah, we did have a debate. We had a debate both on the House and the Senate side this year. And anybody that says that we haven't, I was in the Health and Human Services, before I became the majority leader, I had 4 years as chairman of Health and Human Services. And during my 4 years, I had over 6 days of hearings and debate. I had hearing after hearing after hearing. And I said that to somebody here a while back, and they said, yeah, and you're the last one that did. Well, that's probably true up until now. This year, our Health and Human Services Committee on the House had a hearing. The one on the Senate had a hearing, so we had 2 hearings. 90% of the people do not believe in Medicaid expansion. So here's that I really kind of get to. I told you guys earlier, you all, about early on when the Cancer Society did their poll. So it's probably been 4 years ago, I did a poll. I paid $7,000 for this statewide poll out of my campaign funds because I wanted to know something. So they keep telling us, and I told you that if I would have got the poll and did not know any more than what I know, I would have answered yes too. I'd have said, yeah, I agree, we ought to do that because of the way they present it. But here's what you find out. When you do a poll and you educate during the poll, just like I have tonight, instead of it being, and it wasn't 90%, it's 70% is what they say, when you educate, that poll drops to less than 40%. And that's the truth, because I paid for it, and I did it. I did the education, and once you educate, it's no longer 70% saying it, because they're saying it because they're blind. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea what Medicaid expansion is. So truly, if you educate, it's not 70%. It's certainly less than 50%. Mine was around 40%.
All right, that concludes our questions for tonight. Let's give a big round of applause to Speaker Hawkins for coming. I also think we deserve to give thanks to the Granny Brigade for hosting this for us tonight. And I believe the lady's name was Davis, who prepared the meal, is that correct?
Mel Davis.
Mel Davis, tremendous job on the food. Thank you for that. Wonderful. I do want to remind you before we dismiss, this weekend is Memorial Day weekend, and may we always be remembering and honoring those who gave their life to enjoy the freedoms that we've discussed openly tonight. So make sure you honor those who have given their lives.
Tina and I would like to thank every one of you for coming out. I hope that you got a little educated tonight. And next month, June the 18th, the Granny Brigade will be hosting a primary candidate forum for our county and city candidates. And it will be at the Carver Center at 7 p.m. And it is June the 18th. And we will be notifying the candidates after the deadline for them to register. And those of you that belong to the Granny Brigade, we're asking you to stay around and help us put up the tables and chairs and clean up the hall. Thank you for coming again.